All right, welcome back. This is part number 2 of CSIS 2200, Managing Information Systems, chapter number 10, chapter number 11, sorry, Enterprise Systems. All right, we left off with supply chain management, and so carrying that on, let's look at some of the, what does supply chain management, what are some of the key, I guess, functions that it tries to organize or coordinate in the software system. So one of the key ones at the early stages of the supply chain is procurement. As I've mentioned, procurement is procuring or acquiring or collecting, buying your raw materials. In fact, procurement is a job title. There's a lot of people that work for companies, and that's their job, is to go out and procure raw materials for the company to keep the company running. So that's one of the key, components or features, functions that is in part of the supply chain management system. All right, the second one is transforming materials into intermediate and finished products. So intermediate would be the example of, you're procuring a bunch of raw wood. Let's say, you see on the rivers, a lot of places they have these raw logs that they've cut down. Someone purchases those, procures them. They ship those down to the mill. The mill will then transform them into an intermediate, which would be something like a board. And then that board would then be possibly shipped off to somewhere else to be turned into furniture, or maybe built into a housing or whatever they're building using the wood products for. So the third main feature or function that SMC coordinates is the distribution of the finished goods to the customer. So shipping it to from the store to the customer, and then of course following up with customer support afterwards. So these ERP systems that work with large supply chains, one of the key features that they provide is that communication between the partnering firms or the firm as it moves from one kind of key component to the next one. So one of those is, communicating the product flow between the raw materials to the intermediate to the product to the customer. So these tools help the communication throughout that entire process. They also provide information, the data that has been processed into information that helps make decisions. And then finally, it also provides financial information, and it shows each stage at how much it costs to buy the raw materials, how much did it cost to manufacture it into an intermediate or finished products, how much did it cost to transport it, how much did it cost to sell it. At each stage within that supply chain, of course, there's value and added usually, and the finance department has to keep track of that at each stage as it flows through the supply chain. So the communication in a firm to make sure that the products are flowing, the information is flowing, and the finance at each stage is a key component of a managing information system or an ERP system, these large ERP systems. Another key thing to keep in mind is when these supply chains are set up, a lot of thought has to go into where are they going to locate physically. This will have a bearing on students that are applying for jobs, because the jobs sometimes are located physically, sometimes near the material location. Not always, but it can be. With someone like Amazon, they're creating these large distribution centers in geographic locations. That might be a large job market right there. So the physical location does have a key part to this whole process in making these decisions, but materials are hard to determine. Like, you can't just say, okay, I want a forest of trees to be planted somewhere where there's a lot of people working, because you can't put the two together sometimes. So it can be difficult. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes they have to ship the raw materials. The manufacturing and the production locations, those are easier to make decisions on where to put them. For example, right now, Tesla Motor Company is putting a new factory in Texas, and because they're trying to get the factory closer located to the people that'll be working in that plant. So that can be controlled a lot easier, and it's usually driven by costs, and those costs can be also driven by governmental regulations. I think Tesla was thinking about putting another factory in California, but because of the taxes, I think what I read was they were moving it to Texas because Texas had a lower amount of taxes, and also the labor force down there was a bit better, or cheaper, I should say, less cost per hour than it was in something like California. Now, the other one is inventory, inventory where it's located. And again, this can be controlled, and it's controlled partly also by time on how inventory can be delivered and distributed within the supply chain. Again, with something like Amazon, they're very strategic when they locate their distribution centers, because they want that to be as most strategically located to roadways and transportation ways to get the product to the most amount of people as soon as they can at the best cost. So you can see there that when they're developing these supply chains, that location has a key factor in when they do that. Manufacturing and production, of course, another one there was, they will maybe manufacture things in other countries where the cost of labor is lower, but then that adds, of course, cost to the transportation and the logistics of moving products and materials into different countries. And then there's a whole other series of problems with regulations and tariffs, etc. All right, the fourth one is, again, I think I mentioned that, is transportation location. When they build these locations, they want to build them close to large communication or transportation corridors, so they can, either on a shipping corridor or a train or a highway near the airport. Tends to be where they have these transportation, where they place them sometimes based on where they can get the products moved the most quickly. Now, another thing that's starting to come about now with logistics and supply chain is green logistics, and the book talks a bit about this, and it is a kind of a growing trend. It's politically motivated. There's a lot of pressure to create green ways of moving products. One thing is, in the supply chain, is we don't really see it on a day-to-day, so it's hard to understand the impact. But when you're moving products, of course, like raw materials, let's say from Canada, like coal, we ship a lot of coal to Asia. Asia then uses the coal to heat up the furnaces, to melt the steel, to make the sheet metal, and then that sheet metal is turned into another product, and they might ship that somewhere else. There's growing pressures to have more logistics around location of things, to be a little more not so based on cost as much now as is based on environmental impacts. And that's a slow trend, but it is working. They are working towards that. Reducing waste in packaging. This is just a simple example. A lot of products were being shipped, and a lot of shipping was occurring that didn't need to, because there was wasted space. For example, if you had containers like round barrels of oil or detergent, and they were in these round containers, there was a lot of wasted space that wasn't being utilized effectively. So what they're doing is they're changing the packaging of transporting a lot of their materials into square rather than having round. For example, cargo containers, you see those cargo containers, they're all square, but what goes inside them, of course, is random. But they're trying to change packaging. You'll probably notice that when you go to your grocery stores, a lot of containers now, like soap, detergent, they used to come in these round bottles. Now they're in sort of a rectangular bottle because it saves on packaging. And the reason for that is it's kind of coming out of this green logistics. And it also comes back to money. And they're doing it primarily because it costs less to ship, doing that as well. So being more efficient can be more green. And it can make being green actually can save money if they do it smartly. The book talks about the Internet of Things, IoT, Internet of Things. These are smart devices that are very specialized. They're like physical apps that, like your thermostat or light sensors or plug-in sensors, or your assistant, your Google Assist, or your Siri Assist, or whatever. They're talking about these having additional benefits in a green logistics because they can control things so much better than not controlling it. For example, refrigerated shipping, they can ship things now, and if they have these sensors on Internet of Things and they're more intelligent, it can keep the temperature at the optimal amount rather than wasting a lot of energy freezing containers that don't need to be as cold maybe as possible. So there's new technologies coming out, and the bottom line is, though, it saves the company money in the end, and it's also a green initiative. Now there is a new trend coming out, and there's new technologies constantly coming out, and these will impact supply chain management as they progress. So there is this technological revolution with new technologies. Robotics have had a huge impact with manufacturing of products, but it's going to continue to get even more so. Artificial intelligence has been steadily increasing, but we've reached kind of thresholds with our current, mechanical computer systems, because we're kind of reaching that threshold of processing power. So with quantum computing, it should be really on this list, because quantum computing can come up with solutions with so much, they can use and correlate so much data and come up with so much better processes, routes, that we can currently right now with our AI or business intelligence or known performance indicators, etc. Asking these questions ourselves. Quantum computing with AI is going to have a significant leap in how supply chain management is actually conducted. So machine learning is part of AI as well. Rapid prototyping. This is a very interesting concept where you're actually building a prototype or an actual one-off in locations where it's needed. So the technologies are kind of coming to the point with 3D printing, for example, where they can actually, you can order a product in one country and then have it manufactured right near where you are, because they can manufacture these products using 3D printing and other technologies rapidly. It's more of a niche market right now, very, very niche market right now. But, these, I've seen in the past that these things tend to, as other technologies catch up, these can blossom and all of a sudden become dominant technologies. The Internet of Things is something to really keep your eyes on. These are those smart devices that we're starting to implement in our houses, that are connected to your router, and they're monitoring things constantly. These smart homes they're basically, smart homes are just filled with Internet of Things, is what's going on with those. They're using this in companies to better track data, track warehousing. For example, if there's a product that the last one on the shelf, a sensor will go off and say, hey, there's a product on the shelf that needs to be restocked. A restocking report will come up, and then there's robots that will then restock the shelves. So it's, the shelves will never be missing a product or have the wrong price code or any of those human errors. So you can just imagine how much more efficient things are going to become when things get automated more. So this graph kind of shows that over time, and they haven't put any dates in here, but that things are starting to really escalate almost exponentially with the advent of cloud computing, software as a service, the Internet of Things, quantum computing, etc., robotics. Blockchain's another one that I highly recommend you guys look into. You might want to do a blockchain for one of your project videos. It's a great thing to understand how blockchain works, especially with cryptocurrencies and other things that are starting to come up with now. Blockchains are starting to look at that with electoral validation, so that blockchains will verify properly an election. So like right now, the U.S. is having a problem with their vote system. There's some discrepancies. So with a blockchain, there would be no discrepancy whatsoever. So there's all sorts of new technologies that are coming up, which is causing this sort of exponential growth and kind of a divergence right now, which is exciting. But it's a great opportunity for new graduates, because you guys are going to be thrown into this, and you'll have all sorts of new opportunities. It'll be a very changing, fast-paced type of environment, which is good and bad, but it is what it is. All right, let's move on to the next slide here. Electronic data interchange. So we're working with our partner companies in the supply chain, or just partner companies, and exchanging information, exchanging data, and it has to happen over a secure type of trans line, like a virtual private network, for example. And sometimes there's electronic fund transfers, ETFs. So it works really well if you're using the same ERP system, because they all work together. They share the same security protocols, etc. And that's why companies tend to want to use or share the same ERP systems. It doesn't always happen, but it's sort of a goal that they work towards. So if a company doesn't have the same ERP as another partnering company, they can still transfer their data, using the internet and certain cryptic web protocols to transmit plain text data so that it's secure, because this stuff is very confidential information. It doesn't usually cost a whole lot to transfer this information. If some companies have the option of using what they call an open EDI, which open is free and open to the public, it doesn't cost anything. Sometimes it's referred to as freeware. These are easy to use, normally independent platforms that you can exchange data between different ERP systems. Of course, there's some drawbacks by doing this EDI. If you do use a proprietary standard or standard with one company, it can be problematic when you're transferring data to another company. Of course, there could be incompatibility issues, or you may need a middleware to do translation of the data into another system. So what that translates into is costs for the partners in transferring the data. So you might have to have people or a department to translate and to work with the data to move it to another platform. Of course, that would add cost to your supply chain. Reduced popularity. Of course, that could be a problem because people don't want to do it if it's proprietary. If it's proprietary, it's very fixed, and people don't tend to buy into fixed ones unless there's a really good reason. They want more open and compatible ones. As a result, the International Standards Organization, or ISO, has been formed. And what's really nice about the ISO and companies, and you'll see this a lot on multinational or global companies, they'll call it ISO 9000 or ISO 9001 compliant. So when you're walking around, sometimes you'll see a company and they'll say they're ISO 9000, 9001 compliant. And what that means is that they conform to a non-proprietary standard for something like data interchange or environmental regulations or other areas. So the International Standards Organization is a group that other companies follow their standards that they can then work with other global partners. If your company isn't ISO, then some companies and partnering companies might not work with you. Sometimes I've had students who've had to become ISO certified. So if you're interested, I think I put a link in here. You can look further into ISO certifications for like data structures, environmental, a lot of IT stuff in ISO standards. All right, so here's a look at that website real quick. And you guys could have a look through this, but if you're in finance within an organization and you're transmitting electronic funds to let's say the raw materials, people to purchase raw materials, and you're doing a lot of EDI for invoicing, or you're doing ETFs for exchanging for funds, is your company ISO? Is your company proprietary? Are you using a similar enterprise resource planning system as your partnering companies? So what the ISO does, and I think you need to be aware of this to make sure to see if your company is, or maybe you could join it and start to follow their regulations and standards, practices, because it could be very advantageous to a company because they can then work with so many more partnering companies. It's a common platform for electronic data interchange. All right, let's move on to the next topic. They're talking about the internet enabling the supply chain management and how it's afforded, the reduction of costs, more timely delivery, improves the service. Well, kind of makes sense. The internet's going to afford a lot more, cost-saving initiatives because of the communication factors, the scheduling, the sharing abilities. There's just so many advantages. I mean, the purchasing power. I mean, how many of us have purchased something online from another country and had it shipped to our country? So the internet definitely improves several aspects of the supply chain management activities. Again, I mentioned purchasing. If I want to purchase raw materials or procure some of those materials, I can get on the internet and I can look at multiple countries, multiple prices, in very short amount of time and get the best possible price for that procurement of that, whatever that happens to be. So I can purchase, I can procure, I can schedule. All this is very easy, or a lot easier, using internet-enabled tools. So these ERP systems are, again, they're very heavily internet-based, like everything is today. In fact, a lot of ERP systems are SaaS, their software as a service, which is usually delivered from the cloud, which is on the internet anyway. So a lot of these programs aren't even run from computers anymore. They're run on the cloud. Inventory management is just a massive advantage now on the cloud because you got multiple inventory systems all sharing their information to better coordinate their inventory management systems. You could imagine a company like IKEA. If you worked for IKEA, some of you might end up working for someone like IKEA. Their inventory management system is absolutely massive, and it would be, and I don't really know because I haven't worked with IKEA, but I could imagine with all the stores and as a global presence, you can imagine how their inventory system has to be shared and coordinated, and all that happens over internet technologies. Also, the delivery of all these products to get them to the right place. And ordering process and customer service, all this is just enhanced using the internet. There's just no way that this could have been done. In fact, if you really think back prior to 1990s, like in the 80s and the mid 90s, we did things in a very mechanical, physical way. And with the internet, things have changed just so much that we've gone through this real quantum leap in how we've delivered products in the past 20 years. So in conclusion, you could think of basically every one of those 6 links in the supply chain, from the raw materials all the way through to the service. Every single one of them is heavily connected to online. In fact, it would be virtually impossible today to run these without an online. They wouldn't be competitive. All right, now the supply chain, as earlier slides have showed, there's actually 6 major stages. This one's showing 5 stages. Sometimes, the manufacturing gets separated into 2, but there's 6 real main components to the supply chain. They're looking here in this slide, talking about the e-marketplace, or third-party players in this model, and we've talked about this in the e-commerce chapter. B2B, of course, is business-to-business models, and one of the key players right now for business-to-business is Alibaba. Alibaba is a large online, e-commerce or e-market model that sells business-to-business, where it's not so much the customer or customer service. It's really from the raw material, not even the raw materials. It's from the manufacturer to the supplier, or the wholesale, the storefront, let's say. So from the manufacturer to the storefront, the business to the business, is really what they're talking about here. So what they're explaining in the slides here is that there's third-party exchanges going on. And we've looked at these models, and this is kind of putting the pieces that we've already talked about, sort of putting the pieces together. So this would definitely maintain or provide a competitive edge in the marketplace. And what's happened is there's these third-party companies like Alibaba that take over the manufacturing. They actually take over the distribution and the shipping to the business. So they act in between the manufacturer business and the storefront business. Because what Alibaba does is it sells like 100,000 toothbrushes. And so some company like London Drugs or some drugstore will purchase 100,000 toothbrushes from the manufacturer, and Alibaba distributes them and ships them and gets them to the London Drugs from business to business, for example. So it really helps maintain a competitive edge for companies like London Drugs, drugstores, or any company that uses a B2B model. It does provide a lot of opportunities for other partnerships to play in. So how that would work is if you had a manufacturer in another country, how do you get a world market? Well, you can go on Alibaba and they can expose you to the entire world. So if you've got a small manufacturing company in another country and you want to sell that product that from your business to another business as a wholesale, you can go on Alibaba in this sort of e-marketplace as a third party and join that supply chain. So the nice thing is it makes business easier for you, because if you're a small manufacturer, you're manufacturing some product, it doesn't mean that you have to worry about the distribution or the shipping. All you have to do is log on to Alibaba, you pay them a commission, and they take care of the rest. So it can really simplify your work, and it can really reduce your costs, because you may not see the value, or you may not have enough value to do this to make a profit. If you go into the distribution business and then you also want to add a shipping business to your business, you may lose value at those two stages and not be as profitable. So some company like Alibaba would be an extreme advantage for a lot of companies. And if you go on Alibaba, there is everything on there. And the reason it works is because they've really modernized the distribution and the shipping. And they've also got, it also works between the raw materials and the manufacturing. For example, Alibaba, you can purchase massive quantities of raw materials, and a company then could then take, a manufacturer could then take that and turn that into a product. They can then use Alibaba then to sell it. So this company can then buy a product from Alibaba through another company, and then they can sell it on Alibaba. So it's just a new dynamic of how the supply chain has been reimagined in the market, in the e-marketplace, using the internet. A couple more things. It solves international time constraint problems. Well, that's kind of subjective, because there's still, time zones around the world, but you can put in an order anytime, and then usually they're filling these orders on a fairly regular basis. So it is more timely, but it's not like everyone doesn't follow the exact same time, of course. Does it make it easier to compare prices and products? Absolutely. I can get online and I can check out a manufacturer of a product that manufactures a product or similar product and compare multiple ones and see which one I would like to purchase. So that it becomes more competitive in that marketplace. So in the end result, it's cheaper for the consumer. Because each of these stages are saving money, the end result gets passed on to the consumer, because each of these stages are trying to drop their prices so that people will buy from them. Okay, I've gone over my time again, so I will cut it off here, and I will see you in part number 3.